Welcome back to Valencia, the European Talent Cup, just getting ready to head out to the grid for their second race of the day here in Valencia. As you can see, clouds starting to appear here in Valencia, but we're still well over 20 degrees, weather pretty much perfect. Steve English and Fran Wild to guide you through the last race of the day here in the European Talent Cup. And Fran, we saw a real ding-dong battle in the European Talent Cup in race 1. We saw lots of riders attacking at the front of the field. We saw once again just the typical racing we see in the ETC, close groups all the way through.
We did indeed, and here's a replay of that race from this morning, and it was a really interesting race actually, and some really impressive performances, not least from the likes of Dirk Geiger. There you can see it took the whole shot from the front row. Yeah, Geiger on that number 6 able to get the lead into turn 1. Keep an eye out for the number 5 of Fallon. He was fast all the way through this race, but he actually went across the track limits a few times too many. He had a couple of penalties during that race, so he's going to need to bounce back from pole position here in race 2. That's the move that Geiger was able to move. Really strong performance from Dirk to be able to consistently get himself through that group. He would end up on the podium spots, but in the ETC it really is a case of just having lots of different riders attacking one another. There's Fallon just running out on the exit of turn 1. He did that lap after lap after lap, and eventually he had to take the long lap penalty, and that dropped him down the order. He'd have a time penalty at the end of the race, and that dropped him out of the top 10 spots. Number 28 of Guevara was able to try and attack as well to get to the front. His teammate Daijiro Sacco as well. But it would be Guevara that was able to always just find a way to try and get to the front. You can see him tapping that tail unit. This was where, unfortunately for Jack Hart, he tapped the ground and he crashed out of this race. Hart, he'll start from the second row of the grid here in race 2, and he looked really strong all the way through race 1. Is he going to be able to score some points? The British Talent Cup podium man. There were crashes, you can see, for one of the Estrada Galicia riders. But at the front of the field, it did eventually start to just splinter into this 5-rider scrap at the front. The number 7 there of Muniz just being aggressive, but he was a bit too aggressive in the closing stages of the race, and he actually ended up tagging the front of the rider in front of him, and he would end up finishing down the order in 20th spot. That's the number 54 of Aldegier. He was touched by Muniz down in towards turn 11, and while Muniz would run through the gravel and try and recover from that, luckily for the race leaders, no ill effects from that, and we were able to get into a proper battle for those final laps. But Guevara would come across the line and claim the race victory from the opening race here of the ETC here in Valencia. So plenty of celebrations there for Guevara, and he was able to get onto the top step of the podium and lift the trophy of the ETC Race 1 race victor. But who's going to be the race victor here in race 2? The riders get themselves ready to get to the grid. Fran, when you look at this race, just like what we saw there from the highlights, it really is a case of maximising any opportunity you get to try and attack the riders around you. It really is, and considering obviously it is a fairly entry-level series, the ETC, it is such a great place to try out those tactics, which can become such an important part of winning and racing. And yeah, definitely this morning Guevara making the most of that, and yeah, just pretty perfect race from him almost, and really strong at the front and leading quite a few laps in the latter stages, and then just able to keep his powder dry and then take that win. And I realised earlier I've been calling it shrubbery, and it's orange trees, of course, because we're in Valencia. And as you can see, still 26 degrees track temperature, 21 degrees outside, like we saw on that shot at the start of the broadcast. There's a few more clouds here, but nothing too worrying at all. Still beautiful, perfect racing conditions.
Yeah, the orange trees here and the orange groves in Valencia, but luckily the big orange ball in the sky very much prominent here, over 20 degrees, and it's been absolutely perfect conditions here.
That was poetic.
Tell you what, it's almost like we planned these things, Fran. But I'll tell you what, like the ETC riders, there's not much planned here. This is where you got to just react to what happens around you. You got to try and take advantage of any of the issues that happen around you. That's Guevara, the race victor from the opening race of the day here in Valencia. And for Guevara on the 28 machine, really strong performance. He's been inside the top 10 all the way through this season, as you can see. And Guevara, he's going to be a man to watch during the course of this race as well. But for all these riders in the ETC, they'll know that they really need to try and just react to everything around them during the course of the proceedings. And for the riders now, as you can see, with Fallon on the grid as well. He needs to try and react and just show that he can build on what pace he had, Fran, in that opening race, because just got himself caught out so many times during the course of that race.
Yes, he was a little bit naughty down at turn 1 several times in a row, and then had to take that long lap penalty. And then, like you said, I think at the start of the show, he then got a time penalty as well. But starting from the front row and trying to fight back a little bit and show that he's had the pace throughout the weekend, and now he'll have the pace in the race as well. And here, Jose Antonio Rueda. So some fairly solid results. So an 8th place this morning and 7th in Estoril. So not so bad, but I'm sure he'll be looking for a little bit more now, because he obviously also had a fairly dramatic Estoril. Started from pole, except he didn't, at least in one of the races, with a problem on the grid, and then forced to start from the back. So been a fairly dramatic season so far for the young Spaniard, who has shown some really good ETC form in the past.
Yeah, and for Rueda, you would expect to be able to see him have a bit of a run through, just like you would for this man, Dirk Geiger. As you can see there, 2 top 5 finishes through the start of this season, including a podium here in race 1. As you can see, the grid for race 2, slightly different to what we have in race 1, with the race 1 Victor Guevara starting from pole position and just pushing everyone else down a spot. So Dirk Geiger misses out from that front row spot, moves down onto the second row of the grid in 4th position, and we should see next with Jack Hart on that second row of the grid. And there is Hart, and as you said, Fran, it was absolute heartbreak in the opening race of the day. But Hart, the Scottish rider, he really does look like he's got good pace here, Fran. Really good in race 1, just got caught out with that crash. He
was one of those that was most definitely a surprise not getting to the end of that race in a fairly substantial top 10 position. He did drop down a little bit initially in race 1, but then had made a really good comeback and just slowly moving his way through that group. And then, unfortunately, when he was just about in podium contention and starting to look like he was really going to challenge, just had that crash out of contention. So it will be interesting to see what the Scot can do now. Hopefully avoid a repeat of that and see what he's got. But it was a fairly chaotic race for many this morning. And on to the next one, it's a 12-year-old David Munoz. So this morning a 5th place, so pretty solid after, as you can see, a more difficult race too, certainly in Estoril. But so far so good for him, and some solid results, and I'm sure this afternoon he'll be looking for another one.
Yeah, Munoz, as we could see there, with another top 5 finish in race 1, just steadily went about picking up his points, picking up the places around him, but he'll certainly look to try and go with that leading group now in race 2 here in Valencia, and we should be able to see Adrian down on the grid now as well. Sorry, it's Daijiro Sacco from that 3rd row of the grid. And for Sacco, he was really good in race 1, Fran. We saw him in that final corner able to make really good exit down onto the long front straight here, and able just to make a lot of slipstreaming moves.
Yeah, he was certainly one to watch down the main straight and into turn 1 was Sarko. And really, really good race for him after a more difficult season opener in Estoril. So great to see that from the Japanese rider. Yeah,
for the Japanese rider, of course, born in Spain, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say his parents were massive Kato fans. Number 74, named Daijiro, and if he's anything like his namesake, he's got a lot to live up to. But he showed in race 1 that he's actually got the ability to try and be aggressive, to try and attack, and to try and make some moves. You can see the Estrella Galicia rider, Diego Moreira, down on the 3rd row of the grid as well, and as you can see there, 2 consecutive top 6 finishes for him, and 1 in difficult conditions in Estoril, and then here this morning in Valencia. Good conditions here all the way through the day. You'd expect to see him up there in that leading group once again, Fran.
Yeah, he was another one of those like teammate Rueda, who in Estoril had quite a dramatic start, and he wasn't able to get going for the sighting lap and then had to start from the back, but he didn't. He took his grid position and then ended up with a ride-through penalty. But nevertheless, some impressive stuff from him there. And then this morning, like I said, in the dry, very different conditions, and definitely making that pay and coming home with another good haul of points and a top 6 finish.
Yeah, and you can see Dan Munez, we saw the number 7 rider struggle in the closing stages of that race 1. He just tried to get down the inside, forced to move, and just got caught out. He was trying to make that move on the number 54 machine down in towards the end of the lap, and unfortunately for him, Aldegier was able just to defend that position, and Muniz ran off through the gravel trap, dropped down to 20th, but he's looked fast, Fran. He should be right there or thereabouts, but in this race once again.
Yeah, 20th does not tell the story for him at all, but that overly optimistic move, luckily in some ways he was the only one penalised, because obviously he was the one slightly going over the limit in that instance, but yeah, no harm done, and certainly good pace from him this morning, and chance to show it again now this afternoon with a little less error. And Adrian Cruces there as well, another one to watch, although didn't make too much of a dent in that fight at the front this morning.
Yeah, the one thing about this ETC is there's lots of riders to watch, and as we saw in the CEV Moto 3 race, just how important this ETC can be as well, Fran, because this is a great proving ground. We've seen it already with Halgado and Artigas running inside those podium positions and running at the front through the Moto 3 race, and this does just show what the ETC can lead to for all these riders.
Yeah, exactly. No specific spoilers, but it really has shown today in the Moto 3 category how important the ETC can be for these guys to get their careers in gear. So here we go. We've got Guevara, Fillon, Rueda, Geiger, Hart and Munoz on the first 2 rows.
Sacco, Diego Moreira and Dan Muniz trying to bounce back from that disappointment in race 1. He finished 20th in that race after that mistake in the closing stages.
And then Adrian Cruces, Marcos Uriarte and Juan Rodriguez, an all Spanish row 4 now.
Right, row 5 is Para, Seabright, Tapia.
And then Alfano, Rouget and Ortola, the double winner from Estoril back down there.
Yeah, of course, Ortola and Seabright had a grid penalty for race 1, not affected here for race 2. And on the 7th row of the grid, Milan, Luca De Vie and Julian Avila.
And then Torresillas, Garcia, Bulik, Van der Gorberg, Palazzi and Aldeguer down there in 27th. And
then the 10th row of the grid is Josh Watley, Ruda and Andy Koffler.
And then Falcone, Falzone, Garcia, Beekmans, Fernandez and Ziebdrath, the next 3 rows of the grid. Sorry, I almost choked there live on air.
And then Kiko Maria and Verduga on the back row of the grid. But luckily you've managed to survive that, Fran.
I have just about.
And hopefully all these riders will be able to survive this ETC race. 17 laps around the circuit Ricardo Tormo, and it is a bit of a demanding racetrack for these riders because it's so easy to get yourself tripped up with riders around you. As we've seen in all the races so far, it's so easy to get yourself caught out, and it's so easy to lose some time and lose some ground to the riders around you. We saw it in the opening race where it started to splinter down into a leading group of 5 riders. Will we see a repeat of that here in race 2 of the European Talent Cup?
Time will tell. I am slightly split between yes we will and no we won't. But I do think there's a few guys who look like they have the pace to be able to do that again. But I also think there's a lot that those guys that couldn't quite do that this morning maybe will have been able to learn from that first race. And we'll have to see if Lorenzo Fillon has learned where the track goes at turn 1 as well. And hopefully this time the Frenchman will be able to use his pace to get a result.
Yeah, Lorenzo Fillon on the number 5. He'll start from 2nd on the grid. He's been the pace setter all the way through this weekend. But the pole man for race 1, he ended up making far too many mistakes in race 1. He exceeded the track limits on multiple occasions. He got a long lap penalty and then eventually a time penalty. So we have to keep an eye on the number 5 to see whether or not he's actually figured out that the white lines aren't a guideline. They're exactly where you need to be.
Exactly, yeah. And almost struggling to hear you then. It's quite a field here, 38 bikes when they all blast away from the start, although obviously not as noisy as the likes of Moto2 machines. There's just so many of them, but I do love the way quite a few of them always take to that run-off area there, going the full Casey Stoner, gonna roll around to the grid, make everyone wait, roll in, super relaxed, you know. But I think this should be a fairly interesting race, and you can see it looks like Fillon at the front doing the exact opposite, going for the Lorenzo approach of blasting around to the grid and then getting ready to go.
Yeah, as long as not everyone does the Casey Stoner Valencia approach to a warm-up lap, it should be all right. But for all these riders now coming through to the grid, this is the opportunity where you get just to make sure everything's up to temperature. This is where you get the opportunity to make sure you're able to get all your sightings right. On that opening run to the first corner on this siding lap, you try and time your braking point just to at least give you that indication of where you need to brake during the race. So for all these riders, basically what they do is they run past their normal braking point and then they'll just start to counter, they'll start something that just gives them an indication of when they should start to brake. That should give them a good enough indicator for the run down in towards turn 1. You could see there from the opening round of the year, Artola led the championship by doing the double in Estoril. He struggled in race 1 here, was able to pick up 4 points, but he'll now be starting much further up the grid and a lot more confident that he's going to be able to be in that scrap at the front. That's Dan Muniz on the number 7 machine. He ended up down in 20th spot in race 1, and he's trying to make sure he's able to bounce back from that disappointment, because Fran, he's been fast all the way through this weekend. He
has. He's certainly one to watch, and Fillon, like we said, had the pace. Obviously race 1 winner Guevara, and also Dirk Geiger. He was very, very impressive in the first race today, and yeah, that first podium for the former ADAC NEC competitor, who apparently trains with Moto2 rider Lukas Tulovic. Never heard some good reports, so let's see if Geiger can go a couple better this afternoon, or at least get in that that fight at the front again. But this man certainly, I imagine, will be feeling pretty confident for this race now after his performance this morning.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, if anyone's able to double up in podiums in the European Talent Cup at anywhere in this season, they've done a really good job.
They really have, definitely.
A field this size, really difficult to be able to be consistent in it, but at the front of the field it is the number 28 on pole position, and that is Guevara, the race 1 victory. Lorenzo Fillon on that middle of the front row, and then the 95 of Rueda on the outside of the front row, just waiting for the red lights to come on, and it is Guevara on pole, but the red lights are on and the race is underway, and it looks like a great start from Rueda. Lorenzo with a bad start there from second on the grid, Lorenzo Fillon, and it looks like it's going to be Guevara and Rueda down in towards turn 1. Is Rueda on the 95 able to get down the inside? Looks like he is, and he's able to hold on to that whole shot. Good start there from the 95. It looks like the Estrella Galicia boys have all made good starts at the front of the field. It looks like Lorenzo Fillon was able to keep himself onto the exit curb as well, so that's good. Dirk Geiger down the inside on that number 6 machine into turn 2.
Yeah, super start from the German once again, and once again it's those two guys who, well, certainly Rueda, who was on the outside, or rather the inside of turn 1, on the 3rd position on the grid, who got a really good start there, but it looks like Guevara doesn't want to waste any time whatsoever in stamping some authority on this one. Once again, Poleman immediately strikes back and is at the head of this race.
Yeah, good move there from the 28 to get down the inside. Guevara back into the race lead, running a bit wide there from Rueda, and also from Fillon further back. Fillon just tapping his seat unit already in these stages, just trying to make sure riders don't be too aggressive around them. But on the opening lap of the race, it's all about elbows out. It's all about trying to make sure you're able to get to the front of this group, because if you're at the front, you're out of trouble. If you're at the front, you give yourself that opportunity to make sure you're able to fight for these race victories. Big field like this, 38 riders, it's very easy to get yourself caught out.
Yeah, so easy, and certainly Guevara so far doing a pretty perfect job of it. Just lost the lead at the start there, but straight back into control pretty much, the Spaniard. But certainly the likes of Rueda will want to make sure he doesn't make too much of a gap, although it can change so quickly in the ETC. Nothing too much to worry about at the moment. I think Geiger may have made a move yet down the inside there, so the German obviously fairly keen to get on the chase and make sure that the race 1 winner does not escape. Have to see though into turn 1. I think it looks like the Spaniard may be able to hit back.
Yeah, good move from Geiger into the last corner, but he's going to be under attack down in towards turn 1 from a lot of riders. 5 abreast down into turn 1, and it's the 64 that actually gets himself through to the front, and that is Muniz. Good move there from the 64, but Geiger's going to try and attack back down in towards turn 2. Fillon going to have to be running around the outside. Rueda just trying to make sure that he's able to assert himself inside those top 5 positions, but as it stands right now, Muniz able to hold on to that 2nd spot. You can see further down the order our total the race winner from the opening races of the year in Estoril. He's down in 12th, just in front of Jack Hart. Hart once again with a lot of work to do. Seabright actually in front of them as well, so Seabright with a decent start here in race 2.
Yeah, most definitely. That's good to see from Seabright. And yeah, Jack Hart just losing out a little bit off the line again. But certainly in race 1, he showed he could bounce back from that fairly quickly and get back in the mix. So he'll have to keep an eye on the Brit as well. But looks like now Fillon going to attack Geiger, or certainly looking fairly feisty behind the German. But at the moment there, you can see that gap behind Guevara has just continued to grow that bit. And it looks like it's just over a second now by a few hundredths.
Yeah, Geiger always good under the brakes down into turn 8. We didn't see him attack too often in race 1 down there, so Fillon might have had the run, but Geiger able to brake really deep. Good performance there to be able to hold on to 3rd position. But now Fillon under attack from the Estrella Galicia bike behind him. That's Diego on the 92 machine, Diego Mirera, and just trying to make sure he's able to attack the number 7 there of Dan Muniz as well. Though we saw in race 1 he was really strong. We saw in race 1 that Ivan Guerrero was able to come through the field. He's opened up a massive lead here, just taking advantage of all the scraps. behind in that fight for second. It's still Munoz in second position in front of Geiger. Is Geiger going to be close enough to try and attack down in towards turn 1? The gap at the front, though, 1.5 seconds right now. Geiger is close enough to try and attack down in towards turn 1. He needs to make this move stick because they need to make sure they're able to try and close in on Guevara and keep him under pressure in this race. Geiger up into second. Fallon's going to try and follow him through down in towards turn 2. Guevara, as you can see, with the fastest lap of the race. That's why he's been able to open up such a big lead in these early laps.
Yeah, he is a pretty perfect performance so far from the race 1 winner in the lead, and just stretching that lead even more. But yeah, Geiger made short work of getting back to the front of this freight train chasing him at the moment, and the German looks really controlled and very much in charge of himself at this point, and have to see if he will be able to start trying to eat into that lead. But at the moment, you have to say Guevara, it's looking like it's going to be his to lose if this continues. Yeah,
Guevara out in front, but there is also a slow rider out in front of this as well, as Fallon tries to get down the inside into turn 8. He set that move up a little bit earlier this lap. That's why he's able to get down the inside. And that's Daijiro Sacco that's gone down. It looks like it's a turn 6. And Daijiro out of this race. We saw in race 1 he was able to be really aggressive, get himself to the front. But the teammate to Guevara is out. That was actually down at turn 2. So for the Guevara squad now, the real focus does just turn on to the number 28 machine. But for Daijiro, he'll be able to get back in action in Catalonia in a few weeks time, actually 6 weeks time, for the next round of the ETC. But he has been able to have a decent weekend here in Valencia.
Yeah, it's unfortunate obviously when your worst result of the day comes in the second race, but certainly that performance in race 1 was great to see from the Japanese rider, and he can take a lot of positives from that before, like you say, the next round out at Catalonia. Not sure who it is that is now just ahead of Guevara on track, but yeah, that could definitely make it interesting.
Yeah, Fallon under attack here as well.
Fallon, Geiger immediately striking back against the Frenchman and taking over again. But at the moment, certainly that gap is just continuing to grow. It's now 2 seconds. You could see that rider getting out of the way pretty quickly there for the leader. But Fallon and Geiger now going to have a bit of a struggle, and hope that he's going to see those blue flags, because they're squabbling amongst each other. Never mind trying to get past a slower rider.
Yeah, it's Josh Watley that's gotten out of the way. So Watley able to see the blue flags. If you see blue flags, you're in a race, but you're not in this race, so you got to get out of the way, and that's exactly what Watley's done. He's had a look over his shoulder there as well, so he's going to get himself right out wide to let all this group through. And good riding from Josh Watley when the race leader came through. You can see he pulls off to the side just to make sure everyone else is able to get through. It is still Fallon that's up there in second spot, just in front of Geiger and Munoz on that number 64 machine, with David Munoz on the 64. Danny is a few further spots back, just in 6th position there on the number 7 machine for Danny Munoz.
Yeah, so yeah, this is a good little group here at the moment. Still kind of a trio here and a little bit of daylight, but definitely not too far back. You see another move there. Not sure who that was who went through, but I think it might have been the number 7 of Daniel Munoz there making a move. But these guys are pretty much in their own battle at the moment. And yeah, like I said, that gap had gone out to 2 seconds last time over the line for Guevara. Be interesting to see if it's changed again this time around. Yeah,
the only way that you pull out a lead in the ETC is if you're able to take advantage of the riders squabbling around you, and that's exactly what Guevara has been able to do. This is Guevara, the race leader on the 28, the race victor from race 1 as well. As he comes across the line, the lead has stretched out to 2.3 seconds. We had another crash as well, and it was Roberto Garcia that went down at turn 5, so hopefully that'll be cleared up by the time these riders get around to that section. It's just one of the right-handers at the start of the lap, but as they fan down in towards turn 2, you can see all these riders starting to attack. Munoz down the inside on the 64 on Fallon. Nice clean move down into that section, and is Fallon going to be close enough to try and attack straight back? This is down in towards turn 4 and 5, so this is where the yellow flags were out. Hopefully they have been cleared. Fallon just tapping that seat unit, but Munoz isn't listening to that at all.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, the Frenchman seemed fairly eager to strike back there, and obviously has been one of the key protagonists at the front of this little freight train group. But at the moment, this squabbling isn't going to do them any good at all. But yeah, definitely Geiger, Fallon and Munoz all making their presences felt in this group, and it's all getting pretty tight already, even though we've still got 12 full laps to go after this one.
Yeah, you can see the run down into turn 8 as they were using that slipstream. Geiger just trying to just make sure he was able to have some room there alongside Fallon, but Fallon able to hold on to that third position. But while Fallon might be trying to think about being able to close that lead down to Ivan Guevara, it's going to be really difficult to close down 2.5 seconds here in the ETC. This is the scrap per second, and it's likely to stay as a scrap per second unless Guevara makes a mistake. But Lorenzo Fallon able to get right through that left-hander, and that looks like it's hard again. Third crash in a week for Hart. He crashed out of the British Talent Cup at Silverstone, and now he's also crashed out of both races here in the ETC. Disappointment for Hart, because he's shown he's got that pace, got that talent, just hasn't had the results to back it up just yet. The 64 of Munoz trying to get down the inside in towards turn 1, but he's actually just been engulfed with the slipstream from Geiger as well. So Geiger holds on to that second spot, and just seeing that Jack Hart was involved in the crash with Ortola as well down at turn 8, so maybe both of those related to one another.
Yeah, have to wait and see if we get a replay of that incident. Two fairly fast guys involved in that, so yeah, hopefully both up and okay. And yeah, here we are back in this battle. So Fallon is yeah, just falling a little bit further back now again, but definitely looks like there's no signs of this squabble abating, and still I think going to keep holding themselves up. It was 3.3 over the line last time to Guevara, so I think we can safely say the Spaniard is definitely gassing it for the win today, and really on course to do the double, which is very impressive in the ETC. We did see it once last season, but yeah, nevertheless, really impressive feat.
Yeah, for Guevara, of course, the 14-year-old just having a really solid day's work here in Valencia. But you can see for this scrap per second, it looks like Munoz there just getting frustrated as well. We saw him just banging his head down in a little bit of frustration there as well from the number 64, but he's still able to hold on to that second position in front of Fallon. Now also Danny Munoz on the number 7, and then Geiger on the number 6. But we'll wait and see whether or not there was any sort of contact there as well, Fran, because maybe there for Munoz on the 64, maybe he just felt that the riding just getting a little bit too aggressive. It does look like everyone's just sort of getting right there into a proper scrap, because with the gap to the race leader Guevara, it's just stretched out too far now, where this really is a scrap that's just going to be for second position.
Yeah, exactly, and you can see they've got an awful lot of daylight behind them as well, so not too much danger of other people joining this group and this fight. But as you can see there, Fallon taking back over at the front of this group. Couldn't see from that angle if he managed to respect the track limits there. You could see there's a few gestures, and yeah, getting a bit close and a little bit heated in this group now. As you can see there, a bit of a clash between Geiger and Munoz, but everyone's still on, and just need to keep it a little bit calmer, I think, here.
Yeah, Fallon shaking his head like that across the line, like this is a scrap for a race position. The gap between them and the race leader, it's out to 4 seconds. You're not going to catch the race leader, so it really is a case of just having a straight up fight. Obviously, with only a third of this race gone, though, there is a big advantage just to being a little bit calmer, just making sure that you're able to make sure to get to the end of this race and have this as the scrap per second position, because it's easy, as we've seen there, just to end up having an instant, getting bars caught with one another, just end up having a crash in this race. None of those riders want that. They want to be able to fight until the very end of this race. Exactly,
they all do. And yeah, definitely, sometimes it can be a little bit amusing, some of the rider frustrations, as though they're angry at actually having to race. But yeah, they all need to just maybe take a bit of a deep breath in that second group at the moment, just reset it a bit. Like I said, it's most likely going to remain a fight for second, and it's still pretty close together in that little freight train. So yeah, just don't try and take each other out, nothing too crazy, just keep it calm, and knees and elbows inside the carriage at all times a little bit more, please.
Yeah, hands, fingers, knees and toes, and out in front it is Fallon that is just trying to stretch this lead. And if there's any rider that you want at the front of this group, it is the number 5, because he has been the fastest rider all the way through this weekend. Maybe he's going to allow this group to start to stretch out a little bit and just try and splinter it. You can see there Munoz on the number 7. He's trying to make sure he's able to finish on the podium after the disappointment of race 1 where he had a crash in the final laps, and wants to make sure he's in a position to be able to attack on that number 7. The 64 of David Munoz up in third position.
A bit optimistic looking, that move, definitely. Fallon, no thank you, it shuts the door. And down into turn 1 as well, I was scared the latter Munoz was going to make that move as well. It's all getting pretty feisty in this group, but at the moment the Frenchman seems fairly solid at the front of it, and I can imagine yeah, if he thinks he does have the pace to pull away, that's obviously the root of his frustration in just getting caught up in these squabbles consistently with these guys just behind him. But and you can see around there pitch perfect track limits from the Frenchman, but it was the number 7 Munoz, just a little bit over the green stuff.
Yeah, for Fillon, he is the fastest rider on the track, pulled in a third of a second the last time around. So once he's at the front of this group, he's able to set a really good pace, and that's why we're starting to see the group just in a single line. They're all just trying to be on their absolute limit to go with Fillon. He is the fastest rider on the track right now, and you want to be able to make sure that you go with him to try and just separate yourself out from the rest of this group, because as it stands right now, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 riders in that group, and it is so easy to get yourself caught out if you end up with all these riders together.
Yeah, and like you say, obviously every single rider that you can drop from a group from up in that pace is another rider you don't have to fight towards the end of the race. So definitely looks like that Estrella Galicia trio just struggling maybe a little bit more to keep up with these guys at the moment, but we'll have to see. There's a few scrappy corners from those guys. If they can tuck back in and keep it a bit cleaner, maybe they'll be able to close that gap down a little bit. But you can see another 3 tenths there last time around, so it's certainly yeah, it's getting a bit closer, but it's certainly a long way to go, and only 9 laps to do it in.
Yeah, it is just coming down by a third of a second a lap with Fillon at the front of this group, but the gap right now, as you said, Fran, 3.4 seconds, so with 9 laps to go, he could theoretically catch him, but once you get into those final couple of laps, that's whenever you start really racing with the riders around you. That's whenever it's so difficult to set that pace. That's whenever it's really tough to be able to keep closing that gap on Guevara. In any of these Talent Cup races, whether it's in Britain or in Asia, once a rider stretches out to a lead, it's really tough to close them down, because all these bikes so evenly matched that really any advantage you have just comes from how you're riding. So you really need to be on that absolute limit. Guevara, though, out in front, he doesn't have to be on that limit. He just needs to hit his markers, make sure he's able to set a consistent pace.
Yeah, he just needs to essentially avoid mistakes and keep it nice and tidy, and keep it nice and calm and consistent, does Guevara. And I imagine the confidence he'll feel after that race 1 win this morning, he'll be feeling pretty good out there at the front. Although obviously they always say when you're at the front on your own and it's this kind of race, every single noise you hear from the bike you think is something about to go wrong, and you're just hyper alert of everything that could mean you actually fail to finish the race. But at the moment, looking pretty good from his side at least, and yeah, definitely the man to beat, and still with that clear advantage. Yeah,
I think for Guevara's sake, it's a good thing that he picked up the race 1 victory, because if you're in this situation and you haven't picked up that race victory, maybe you do start to hear some noises.
Plenty pressure if this was for his first win. But yeah, obviously already been on that top step this morning, and yeah, the gap pretty solid that time around, hasn't changed that much. But we do have a track limits warning for rider number 45 with the most difficult name on the grid.
Yeah, Luca de V with that
Luca de Fleischhauer, I'm going to say. Well, it's a little bit of a Germanization, but yeah, that's a very tough name. Unfortunately, track limits warning for him, so he'll have to be a little bit careful that he doesn't do that again. Obviously, if he just gets a warning, no harm done if you stop doing it, but if he is a repeat offender past this point, then it might be a penalty coming for the Belgian.
Yeah, I was going to say it might be easy for you to say Luca de Vlaschler, but not so easy for me. So Luca de V with that warning, and hopefully he doesn't have to take a long lap penalty. You can see here with the former championship leader Ortola as it stands right now, because Guevara would move himself up to the top of the standings. Ortola, of course, won both races in Estoril, and just had a real tough weekend here so far in Valencia, trying to make sure he's able to get himself through the field and score some decent points. But for Ortola, it is a real struggle right now today.
Yes, it really is. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens over the course of this season with Ortola. Obviously, the conditions in Estoril really difficult, and seems to just be struggling a lot more this weekend in the dry at Valencia. But, of course, this track and Estoril, extremely different venues as well. So, it remains to be seen quite maybe what was the factor that saw those, yeah, just amazing performances in Estoril, and then a bit more muted this weekend from the who will be the former championship leader if this man at the front here can keep this going.
Well, just looking at the times once again, it's another third of a second that Fillon's been able to pull out of the race leader as we come in towards the final third of this race. Munoz able to get himself up into second spot, but Fillon has been able to hold back some of that time. He's pulled in a second in the last 3 laps, so he is doing his best to be able to do that, but Munoz just gets himself through into the lead of this battle, so he's up into second spot now, and that's going to halt the progress of this group. You can see that they have stretched away a bit of a lead. It's Dirk Geiger just behind them on the number 6 machine. There's a big gap now between Geiger and the riders behind them, being led by the Estrella Galicia riders. Around about 1.2 seconds now between Geiger and the riders behind them.
Yeah, you can see that Estrella Galicia trio there just dropping off the back of this group, as it looked like they would before, and they've got company from Daniel Munoz as well, the number 7. But fellow Munoz, David Munoz on the 64, is still well in this little battle for second here, and Fallon looks fairly eager to get back in front again and start trying to close that gap down. But who knows, maybe one of the others in this group thinks they do have better pace than the Frenchman, but a little bit wide there from Munoz, allowing the Frenchman back through.
Yeah, Fallon able to get himself through into second, but Munoz able to attack back down in towards the uphill section now, and a good clean move being made down in towards the right-hander at turn 12. That's actually a tough move to make because the track just bottoms out down through there. Able to make the move, but he's now left himself open for attack down in towards the last corner. That's Ivan Ortola out of this race, so his miserable day continues, and at least for him it also brings a close to his Valencia weekend. Keep an eye out for the 24, just lost that really early on the exit for Ortola, and he's going to slide all the way along this racetrack. He was out of the points anyway, but for Ortola, he'll have to regroup for Catalunya and round 3 for the European Talent Cup. The 64 of Munoz is able to get from 4th to 2nd, and he's able to keep that on the track as well, and able to get himself through into second spot in front of Geiger. But that fight, Fran, all it's done is it's brought everyone back together.
Exactly, so quickly it seems. All of those guys just behind, straight back on the scene, and we have another real group fight now for second again.
And it really is a big scrap now for second. You can see those 3 riders at the front of this group, and that'll be Munoz, Geiger and Fallon. But now the riders all behind them, all starting to close up. Last time around, the number 7 of Dan Munoz was actually the fastest rider on the racetrack. So Munoz was really quick, and it was actually 0.6 of a second faster than the race leader as well, so shows just how much progress he was able to make. But let's see if he's able to try and make some progress in this group. Fallon trying to just ghost down the inside into turn 8, not quite close enough to be able to make that move on Geiger. But you would expect that Fallon's going to try and make the moves again. But now that we're into this final third of the race, Fran, it's even harder to try and stretch that lead once again, because now that the group has contracted once again, you have to do all that hard work again.
Exactly, and it's not just about attacking and trying to set that pace and get to the front of the group. Also so much defending, and you can lose positions so quickly, because most times when you're overtaken, unless it's a slipstream, you will create a gap, and then the guy behind can try and pick your pocket as well, and you can really get shuffled back fairly quickly. So yeah, definitely I imagine Fallon is pretty frustrated now after he's made some pretty good progress cutting down that gap, and then the likes of Geiger and Munoz just able to get past the Frenchman, and it looks like, I think now it's going to be game over. We've got 5 laps to go, and it's 3.8 seconds now that Guevara has out front.
Guevara is checked out from this race, and all of Fallon's work to try and close that down, it all comes to nothing. And now he's going to have to try and make sure he's able to attack and try and pick off these riders around. And we've got 5 laps left for these European Talent Cup riders in the second race of the day. There is still another European Talent Cup race coming up after this for the non-qualifiers, but for these riders, this is their opportunity to finish this weekend really strong. Fallon, for all the pace he's had, Fran, he only has a handful of points from that opening race of the day, just because of those time penalties and long lap penalties, but he needs to come out on top of this. Yeah,
he does. I think slightly for his own sanity as well, after, like you said, so much pace, and then a few too many mistakes in race 1 and falling foul of track limits warnings. But so far this race, the Frenchman seems a bit of a reformed character when it comes to that. Certainly a lot tidier in race 2, so that's good to see. But yeah, definitely will want to come out on top of this scrap for second at the very least.
Yeah, we need to go down to that garage, see if there's a blackboard at the back where he's been having to do some lines just to say, I will stay within track limits, I will stay within track limits, I will stay within track limits.
Seems to be working so far.
It's working so far, and he's done a good job
reformed this afternoon. But yeah, now definitely a big freight train battle again for P2, like we're saying, and with 2 Munozes in there, pretty much the whole of the Estrella Galicia contingent, as well as Fallon and Geiger. So I think this is going to get pretty fruity now.
Yeah, 4 laps to go for these riders. The race leader Ivan Guevara has just come across the line to start this lap, so the gap now out to 4 seconds. So Guevara very much on course to be able to claim that double race victory here, as Fallon moves himself through with a double move down in towards turn 1 to go from 4th into second spot. Good clean riding there from these riders in the second group. You can see Muñoz trying to get down the inside on the number 7 machine. That's Dan Muñoz. Now he's just behind David Muñoz in front of him on the 64, but you can see Dirk isn't willing to accept that move. He's trying to attack straight back, Fran. That's what you need to do in these situations. You need to counter punch straight away, and the best defense always good offense during these kind of races.
Yeah, and like we've said, obviously now this is most definitely a scrap for second, so we're slowing each other up. As long as you're still in that group, doesn't really matter that much. They've got an awful lot of daylight behind them, so as long as they're all still tightly packed in this group or getting to the front of it, then yeah, tactics now are certainly focused on the guys all around them on the track.
Yeah, and just behind them another track limits warning being given this time for number 47, Fenton Seabright. Seabright's down in 11th spot. Of course, he had that time penalty in qualifying, or grid penalty in qualifying. Hopefully he's not going to fall foul of the track limits and have another penalty this weekend. But at the front of this group, it looks like Fallon's under attack from Muñoz. Not quite close enough for the number 64 to try and force that move, but 3.5 laps to go now, Fran. This is where we're starting to see this group split. We're starting to see it spread out a little bit. This is where we're starting to see who's got the pace. You can see there with Fallon just how hard he's going. He's full on through that section of the lap.
Yeah, looked like a couple of the group there, a little bit on the green there, but nothing too drastic, although I have to keep an eye on that though. But yeah, this will certainly be when the likes of Fallon will be trying to stretch this group out and see who can live with him on the final few laps. And also those as well who've been playing a little bit cooler will be wanting to make those moves and make sure they're near the front of this group come the end of the race, because obviously you can certainly leave your attack pretty late, as we've seen in a couple of different races today, but you don't want to be giving yourself 4 or 5 riders to pass on the last 1 or 2 laps. Yeah,
it's really hard to consistently move through the group here in Valencia. There are overtaking opportunities. We've got 2.5 laps to go, so we'll just take you through some of those overtaking opportunities. We've seen moves down into this corner at turn 4, but it's a tough move to make. The big move in this opening half of the lap, down in towards turn 1, down in towards turn 2, down in towards turn 6 where the riders are coming through now. You can try and shove the bike down the inside, block pass, take the line away from the riders around you, and try and make the move. If you don't make it there, use the slipstream down this back straight to try and get with the riders in front of you and try and just be really aggressive down the inside into turn 8. The only way you can make the move into 8 is if you're really right. Oh, and it looks like Fallon in a little bit too hot on the way into 8, but he managed to get it collected. So Fallon, he knows that he needs to make this move on Muñoz as quickly as possible. Is he going to try it down in towards double rights? 2.5 laps to go in this scrap for a second position. Muñoz still up there in second in front of Daniel Muñoz on the number 7, and then Fallon on the number 5. Out in front though, Izan Guevara comfortably out in front with a 4-second lead right now, even out of shot, Fran.
He is indeed, and yeah, a couple of Muñozes now making their moves to the front of this group, and yeah, it looked like a bit of a domino effect for the number 7 of Daniel Muñoz. Just had a bit of a wobble, and then that upset Fallon as well, and it just gave yeah, a little bit of daylight to yeah, the number 64 at the front of that group, but still very, very close together. And Izan Guevara now, yeah, just that lead is 4.2 seconds, nice and comfy. Just got to keep it together, and just 2 laps to go now.
And you can see down in towards turn 1, the 92 of Maria able to get down the inside. Good clean move there from Diego, the Brazilian rider, but he's actually been caught out there by Muñoz. Muñoz to the front of this group, and another Muñoz just being aggressive down in towards turn 2 as well. 2 Muñozes don't make a right, but they certainly make a fast rider through this early stages of the lap, making their moves. But Dirk Geiger able to get himself through into second spot now in that number 6 machine. Muñoz trying to answer straight back, not close enough trying to carry that speed down in towards 5. Is he going to try and be aggressive into 6th? Probably too far back, but he's going to try it anyway. Send it down the inside, son. And straight away there from Muñoz on the 7, just trying to get himself through to the front of that group. And now it is Muñoz out in front of that group, and Muñoz trying to run around the outside. It's a bit confusing there. Danny out in front.
Too many Muñoz. But yeah, this is a really, really good scrap. We can see now when the 2 Muñozes definitely seem to have decided the time is now, but Dirk Geiger keeping well up in the group now as well. And you can see, yeah, it's Lorenzo Fallon now who's been pushed to the back of this group. Both Estrella Galicia bikes past him.
Yeah, Fallon's been caught out in this It's penultimate lap, and he's forced himself all the way to the back of that group. Munoz able to get through into 4th position as well for David Munoz, just behind Daniel. I'm just going to say David and Daniel for the rest of this lap, I think, because right now it's Geiger out in front of Daniel Munoz, and David Munoz just trying to defend that position there for 4th. And you can see with David able to get down the inside as well, following Daniel down in towards that final corner. Just seeing that there is a long lap penalty as well
for
being given.
So the Belgian does have to take that long lap penalty after that earlier track limits warning, and we're on the last lap though, so that's going to be a pretty difficult thing for the Belgian to see that and take that.
Yeah, you can see down in towards turn 1, Dirk Geiger able to hold on to that 2nd position, but he's going to come under attack down in towards turn 2. All these riders are going to feel that they've got a chance of being able to claim 20 championship points for finishing in 2nd. It's David Munoz up in 3rd position right now, but he's under attack from Diego Moreira on that Estrella Galicia bike. And are we going to see some changes of position here? Because Lorenzo Fillon, he needs to make progress. He's picked off 2 of the Estrella Galicia bikes to move himself up a couple of positions, but he knows he's got plenty of work to do to try and catch up to the rest of this leading group to get himself up onto the podium. David Munoz still in 3rd position right now. Daniel Munoz trying to attack as well in that number 7. Dirk Geiger still in 2nd position on that number 6 machine. Is Geiger going to be able to hold on to the lead of this group? He's going to hold on to it, but down behind them it looks like one of the Estrella Galicia riders up into 3rd position now, and that's going to change once again, you'd imagine. But we cut back to the race leader. Guevara is comfortably out in front. He's got a 5-second lead over this group, and you can see down in towards the double right-handers that David Munoz is able to retake 3rd position. You can see Guevara out in front, and Guevara is going to hold on to this race victory to be able to claim his 2nd race victory of the day. But behind them, there's plenty of action still going underway with the Munozes, Geiger, and also Adrian Cruces on the Estrella Galicia bike. But for the number 28, he can celebrate really early as he comes across the line. Great performance from Izan Guevara to be able to claim the double here in Valencia in the European Talent Cup. But who's going to finish 2nd behind them? You can see a run for the line. It looks like Geiger got caught out there by David Munoz. Geiger's going to have a double podium, but he's going to be down in 3rd spot here in race 2, and it looks like David Munoz on the 64 able to get himself through into those podium positions. That last couple of corners must have been proper action packed in that group. We saw them as we came through that final lap, with plenty of overtaking moves being made, but Izan Guevara able to claim the race victory. He does the double here in Valencia, and the number 28, he picks up 50 points here, and he'll go to the top of the championship here in the European Talent Cup. You can see what it means for David Munoz to be able to claim that 2nd position, come out on top of that big battle for 2nd. 20 championship points for Munoz. You can see the number 5 of Fillon. He ended up in position 5 as well. So despite the pole position, despite all his pace through this race, through the earlier race today, all the way through practice, he comes away with only a handful of points from this weekend. Disappointing there for Fillon. He would have felt that there was definitely the chance to have much more points from this weekend, but Izan Guevara is the big star, and he's been able to claim that double victory. You can see Dirk Geiger able to claim another podium, and Geiger able to stand on the rostrum once again in 3rd position, and he was beaten to the line by 11 thousandths of a second from David Munoz. We'll be able to see that at some point, but real battle to the line there for 2nd. But for Izan Guevara, he's able to just enjoy this moment, picks up another race victory, and thoroughly well deserved there for the number 28. And the 14-year-old, once again, he had top 10 finishes in both races in Estoril, and he picks up a double victory here in Valencia. Really good starts this season for Guevara, and we'll be able to hear from him once he gets down into Parc Ferme. But that really was an impressive performance to be able to stretch out that lead at the flag despite his celebrations across the line. It was still 3 seconds was his race victory. So impressive stuff there from the 14-year-old as he adds to his race victory this morning. Double success. And you can imagine when he goes into school in the morning, he's going to have a lot of stories to tell all of his classmates. But for Izan Guevara, really impressive stuff. Comes back into the pit, into Parc Ferme, and you can imagine the kind of embrace he's going to get from his team. 50 points, perfect weekend for him. His teammate Sacco was inside the top 5 in race 1, retired from race 2, but other than that, a real perfect day for that team. In the background, you can see David Muñoz celebrating his second position as well. Muñoz 3 seconds behind at the flag, but a really good performance from the number 64. Keep an eye out for him for the next round of the championship in Catalonia in about 6 weeks' time. But for all these riders, the key thing here is just to be able to learn your lessons from these races, try and bring them forward, because we saw just how good the European Talent Cup can be as a proving ground, as a breeding ground for rider talent, with what we saw in the Moto 3 races over the course of today as well, with European Talent Cup riders, including the reigning champion Javier Artigas, able to get themselves straight away into the battles for those podium positions in the Moto 3 class. And that's exactly what all these European Talent Cup riders will be trying to do with their experiences from this weekend and from this season, try and move themselves up into the Moto 3 class at some point. So the crowd here in Valencia, they've been treated to plenty of great racing, and 2 great races from that man, Dirk Geiger, down there as well. Double podiums for Geiger, double victory for Izan Guevara, and David Muñoz up there on the podium as well. And for Geiger, of course, the former ADAC Moto 3 Standard Cup champion in Germany, able to show that he's been able to put those lessons to good use. And for Geiger, he'll certainly feel that once again, when we get back underway, that he'll be able to use that experience, because in the opening 4 races of the season, he's had 3 top 5 finishes. Has been a really strong start to the season for him. This is your race victor, Izan Guevara, able to come across the line. He had such a big lead, he could start celebrating that at the last corner, and you can see exactly what he thinks. But we should be able to hear from him down with Fran Wild.
So that was a pretty incredible race this morning, but this afternoon up another level, complete dominance. Congratulations. How was that race too?
Incredible. 2 races, 2 wins. It was the weekend perfect. No words.
Pero en castellano tienes unas palabras más.
Que ha sido un fin de semana espectacular, 2 carreras, 2 victorias. Quiero dar las gracias a mi equipo, a mis patrocinadores, a toda la gente que me apoya. Y bueno, qué decir, impresionante.
Impresionante es la palabra. Enhorabuena, gracias.
Yeah, great performance there from Izan Guevara to claim the double victory. Here's the highlights from race 2 of the European Talent Cup. Guevara was on pole position. He converted that off the line, and he was able to stretch out a lead in this race. But for Guevara, just trying to make sure he was able to stay out of trouble in those early laps, because trouble could be easily found here in the European Talent Cup at Valencia. Took until the 4th corner of the race for Guevara to hit the front. From that point on, he was able to stretch a lead from this massive battle for second. Dirk Geiger down the inside of Fallon. Fallon had the pace to stretch that lead of that group, but unfortunately for him, just could never quite break away from them. So Fallon will go to the next round of the championship in Catalonia, still trying to search for the kind of results that his pace has indicated he can have. Muñoz on the 64 was aggressive through this race, but he was always able to get himself to the front of the group. You could see his frustration starting to boil over at times during the race, but always able to get himself to the front. And the man that had been at the front of the field after Estoril crashing out of proceedings, and he'll be looking to bounce back from that in Catalonia the next round. At the front of that group for second, though, you could see how combative and competitive it was, because riders were falling from the front to the back all the way through that race. But Muñoz was always able to find a way to try and force his moves to try and get himself through into the front of these groups. Guevara might have picked up the race win, but the real battle was for second, with David Muñoz able to claim the 20 points, 11 thousandths of a second in front of Dirk Geiger when they came across the line. He might have been celebrating very early on his final lap, but plenty of reasons to celebrate for Izan Guevara as he comes back into Parc Ferme and back in towards his team as well. Here's the results from race 2 here at Valencia in the European Talent Cup. Izan Guevara able to claim a pretty comfortable race victory by 3 seconds from Muñoz, who was 11 thousandths of a second in front of Dirk Geiger in that scrap for the podium positions. Lorenzo Falén might have started from pole position in race 1, second in race 2, but he dropped down to 5th position at the flag in race 2, just in front of front row starter Rueda. Daniel Muñoz might have had the fastest lap of the race, but he dropped down into 7th spot with Marcus Rueda, the final rider inside the top 10. Fenton Seabright had some warnings for exceeding track limits, but ended up in 11th position with Clément Rouge, the final point scorer here in the European Talent Cup. It's a big field here in the European Talent Cup, and you can see some big names further down the order with the likes of Zonta van der Gerberg outside the points, and also Luca de Vie there. He had the long lap penalty, and the Belgian rider ended up finishing in 11th spot. There were some retirements in this race. We saw Ortola, the championship leader, coming into this weekend, crashing out of the race. Jack Hart, Josh Watley, Garcia also out of proceedings. But while some riders were stumbling, there was one rider thriving this weekend, and that was Izan Guevara, able to claim 2 race victories here in Valencia in the European Talent Cup, and he'll be back up on the top step of the podium. Dirk Geiger was able to claim 2 podiums as well, and David Muñoz was able to recover here in race 2 to be able to get himself up into 2nd position and claim an all-important 20 championship points. So the team prize being given there to the representative from Cuna de Campeones, and very well deserved for that team with a double success for Izan Guevara. We saw his teammate inside the top 5 in race 1 as well, so a very good day for that team. In 3rd position, Dirk Geiger once again able to claim 16 championship points and able to claim another trophy, and the German rider with 2 podiums here in Valencia. And David Muñoz able to finish in 2nd position, claim 20 points for the championship, and good aggressive riding from Muñoz, always looking to try and make the moves, always trying to get himself through to the front of that 2nd group. But our double race victor here in Valencia in the European Talent Cup is Izan Guevara, and you can see for Guevara just what it means for him to be able to pick up those 25 points. Really impressive stuff. And Guevara will be back in action in Catalonia in 6 weeks' time. But for the next couple of days, he's able to bask in the success here of Valencia. And we'll be able to hear the Spanish national anthem for our race victor, Izan Guevara. So a Valencia double for Izan Guevara, and he's able to claim 50 championship points and move himself up to the top of the European Talent Cup standings, and able to enjoy that podium once again. But Framwell down in Parc Ferme, he seemed like he was a lot more talkative after that race victory. Maybe the shock subsiding from his race 1 victor.
A little bit, yeah, I was hoping in Spanish maybe I'd get a little bit more that I could then translate if you're up here, but said exactly the same thing really, plus a shout out for the sponsors, so a bit lost for words. But yeah, a very, very happy man down there in Parc Ferme. And
he'll be very happy whenever he looks at the championship standings. He's moved himself up to a 10-point lead over Ivan Ortola. Ortola only able to pick up 4 points from this weekend here in Valencia. David Muñoz moves up to 3rd in the championship standings. Double podium man Dirk Geiger, he's 15 points adrift in the championship standings. And then you can see the rest of the riders inside the top 10, including the likes of Rueda and Fenton Seabright, able to take advantage of the points really from Estoril. And this weekend was quite a difficult weekend for Seabright. Double points finish, but the grid penalty really was a bit of a hardship for him, put him on the back foot. And Seabright able to claim some points in both races though.
Yeah, he was. In the likes of Jose Antonio Rueda down there in 9th, maybe a little bit of a surprise to see the Spaniard down there. But yes, some interesting performances so far, and interesting to have 2 race weekends with such different conditions. But here we can see so Lorenzo fell on there in 12th. I'm sure he'll be a little bit frustrated with that after the pace he'd had here, but yeah, got some points on the board at least. And yeah, some good performances there, and Adrian Cruz's taking some good points in that race as well, and moving himself up onto the scoreboard.
Yeah, for Lorenzo Falan, he certainly will be looking to make sure he can have a much better weekend whenever the European Talent Cup resumes in Catalonia in a few weeks' time. But for myself, Steve English, and for Fran Wild, thanks for joining us here in Valencia for round 2 of the European Talent Cup and for the CEV Championships. And until the next time in Le Mans for the Moto 3 class and Catalonia for the rest of the classes, we'll leave you with some images from Valencia.
We shall. Thanks for joining us, and hope to see you with us next time out in Le Mans.